nobody seems to be picking up on what kind of a spy Jeffrey Epstein really was. They're so fixated on this titillating sexual information about him recruiting these young teenage girls. Epstein was actively engaged in inquiring into this entire UFO issue.
My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who's worked some of the most important cases in modern American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectraVision Radio.
The February 27th war that Donald Trump has declared on Iran. As the news focuses now on the body count that is being generated now, there's estimated to be some 1,300 Iranian people killed by the bombing assaults. Now, this is over and above the 50 top leaders of the regime that were assassinated by the Central Intelligence Agency and Mossad on the first day of the event, including the spiritual and political leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini. As these body counts mount, the administration is struggling to try to articulate some specific reason why it was necessary to attack Iran due to some imminent threat that was being posed by Iran. Most recently, Donald Trump has announced on March 5th that if he hadn't attacked Iran, they would have, within 2 weeks, have been in possession of a nuclear bomb. This, of course, is denied by virtually all the experts in the world, who assert that it was preposterous to think that they would have a nuclear bomb within 2 weeks, especially in light of the fact that just a year ago, on June 21st of 2025, the United States had basically carpet bombed their entire nuclear enrichment facilities. And so the experts don't believe for a minute that there was any imminent threat of Iran developing a nuclear bomb within the foreseeable future. In fact, Donald Trump had repeatedly stated many times, frankly, that he was doing this simply to effectuate regime change, that he was opposed to the regime in Iran, that they were insulting the United States, consistently declaring that we were the great Satan, and was threatening to support and actually supporting groups around the Middle East to be opposing the United States military occupation of the Middle Eastern oil fields, and he wanted them gone. The earlier pretext that he had asserted was that he was going to attack Iran in their leadership if, in fact, they harmed any of the demonstrators that were demonstrating against the Khomeini administration. And yet, as the body count mounted of the protesters that were being kidnapped and killed by the regime, it mounted from 300 to 500 to 700, and eventually the estimates now are some 2,000 or more people that were killed. Some of the estimates run as high as 6,000, and the medical workers are asserting now that there may be as many as 30,000 people that were killed. Trump had said that he was going to intervene if there was any threat on the part of the regime to actually kill any of the demonstrators. And yet the estimates were rising. The fact of the matter is, it was clear now that Trump was not going to fulfill his promise to stop the people from being killed. And now the Secretary of State is asserting that Israel was getting ready to attack Iran, and that we knew that if Israel attacked Iran, that Iran would strike back against some of our 20 military bases around the Middle East. But that was then denied, that it was us following the threat of Israel to attack them. And now, as I say, the most recent assertion on the part of Trump is that he was doing this because if he hadn't attacked them on February 27th, within 2 weeks, they would have been in possession of a nuclear bomb. So that the administration is struggling mightily to justify their need to attack without having notified Congress or obtained any consent from Congress to declare this war against Iran, required by the War Powers Act that was passed in 1973. So the administration is still struggling in the major news stories, both nationally and internationally, to try to rationalize some need to have immediately attacked Iran without any notice to Congress, without any authorization from Congress. In fact, the administration has insisted that it still has no need to get any justification from Congress whatsoever or authorization from Congress. And now the number 2 story that we find out is that Russia is now being credibly reported to be providing intelligence data from Russia, the satellites and the drones and the other intelligence gathering mechanisms of Russia, providing intelligence data to the Iranian administration on where our major bases all are and other sites, intelligence gathering sites, etc., and also giving intelligence information from Russia to Iran about the movements of our U.S. military forces in the Middle East and our military capacities, such as our ships and our aircraft. So this is dramatically increasing the possible involvement now in the Middle Eastern war of Russia, drawing Russia in directly against U.S. military forces and our soldiers, thereby increasing the threat of a possible miscalculation on the part of the United States and or Russia, evolving into a biblically prophesized massive Armageddon war taking place in the Middle East between Russia, the bear, and the United States, the eagle, from biblical prophecies. Immediately upon the launching of this attack against Iran, the stock shares have been going up dramatically on the part of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman. The Lockheed has gone up 3.3% on the very first day of trading after the attack on February 27th. On Monday, March 2nd, the opening of the market, Lockheed Martin stock went up 3.3% because they're the producers of the THAAD missile defense system and the HIMARS rocket system, all of which are going to have to be replaced now. So that Lockheed Martin is enthusiastic now about having a major new set of purchases from the United States government. Northrop Grumman, its stock rose on the first day of opening the stock market by 4% on one day, because they're the producers of the B-21 Raider stealth bombers that are being deployed. And Raytheon's stock on the first day of the opening of the stock market went up 4.7% in one day, because they are, of course, the producers of the Tomahawk missiles and the SM-3 interceptors. And they're all going to have to be replaced to resupply both the United States and Israel, to replace the weapons that are being deployed. The kind of feckless effort on the part of the Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, to stop any of these activities on the part of Trump. They've invoked the weak and rather insipid War Powers Act and have brought a motion into the United States Senate on March 4th, 2 days after the opening of the Congress, after the war started. And of course, they lost 53 to 47, which was basically predictable. since the Republicans outnumbered the Democrats 53-47. And even though there were a couple of votes, one vote on the Democratic Party, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania voted against the war powers invocation, and Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, voted for it. It was still a straight 53-47 vote against it. It was totally predictable. And in the House voted 219 to 212 against it. And what Trump is doing now is trumpeting, if you will, the defeat of the War Powers Act as a de facto kind of authorization on the part of Congress for him to go forward with the war, which is a totally myopic and perverse interpretation of the War Powers Act and the narrow defeat of it as now authorizing him to continue the war. And now he doesn't even feel bound to have to abide by the provision in the War Powers Act that within 60 days of his initiation of such an action, that he has to obtain the affirmative vote of Congress to allow him to continue his operations, because he believes that the defeat of the War Powers Act resolutions gives him that authority. The Democratic Party, National Democratic Party, is now basically falling back to its pre-war position of relying upon the November 3rd elections, some 9 months away, to potentially take over the House of Representatives and or the Senate, and therefore be able to act as some kind of a alleged bulwark against the activities of Donald Trump, which of course is not true, because they're not going to be able to muster an impeachment in the House. They have to get a majority vote, and the Republicans will never vote for this. And even if they were able to secure a vote in the House, they're certainly not going to be able to get a conviction in the Senate. That's going to require 2/3 majority vote. So even if they took back both the House and the Senate, they're not going to be able to stop Trump from doing this and pursuing all of his activities pursuant to unilateral executive power assertion. The only hope that seems to be being discussed by members of the Democratic Party now of being able to forestall the continued escalation of these military operations on the part of Trump, who has not only, attacked Iran now, but he's threatening Cuba with military action and is threatening to use military force whenever he chooses to do so. He's already done it against Venezuela as well. So it's quite clear that Trump now is getting his blood up about the use of U.S. military force and is attempting to enforce his view of the world on the rest of the world through the deployment of U.S. military forces. And United States military people are not raising any fundamental questions about the illegality of his activity, even though all of the international law centers in the entire world are declaring this to be a flagrant violation of international law and a complete violation of the Charter of the United Nations. And yet the military is not heeding the obligation that they have to resist illegal orders from the president to engage in military actions. Now, the only option that they're discussing now among the Democrats is the potential Epstein file revelations. And they're still focusing, of course, on the Epstein sort of salacious files about Epstein recruiting young 13, 14, 15-year-old girls for people in positions of high power, and that maybe this is going to track back to Trump. So the Epstein files raises its head as one of its kind of desperation steps on the part of the Democratic Party to try to deter Donald Trump from doing what he's doing. These are the major national news stories that are going on. But let's turn to the UFO-related stories that are taking place in this kind of larger geopolitical and geostrategic context of Russia now providing intelligence data, military intelligence data against United States military forces in the Middle East. The first and one of the most prominent stories that the FBI has now joined in the search for the missing top U.S. Air Force Major General, William McCasland. He's been missing since Friday, February 27th, He disappeared from his New Mexico home in Albuquerque, even though he's retired, now a 68-year-old retired U.S. Air Force Major General. He was the top general in the entire United States military, tied directly to the UFO reverse engineering programs. He was, in fact, the man who oversaw all of the waived, unacknowledged special access programs, the advanced aerospace weapons development program, special access program in the United States Pentagon, knowledgeable about the activities of the UFO crash retrievals and the kinetic actions that were being taken against the UFOs to recover additional fully operational UFOs, downing the UFOs in either killing or capturing their non-human occupants. He was also the commander of the all-important U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is the major base, the principal base at which the UFO reverse engineering was actually going on. General McCausland disappeared from his home on February 27th, did not take his wallet, did not take his wristwatch, did not take any credit cards, left no note for his wife. She has now reported he's had absolutely no problems with any medical problems, no signs of dementia of any kind. In fact, just last month, he completed a 60-mile bicycle marathon. He's healthy as a horse, but he's been missing for 10 days with no sign whatsoever of where he is. This has been now declared to be a grave national security crisis, given the information which he possesses and the inability of the FBI or anyone else to get any trace of where he has gone. So this has been one of the main stories during the course of the week. The second most prominent UFO-related story this week has been, of course, the continued increasing discussion about Donald Trump's February 19th Truth Social post, in which he announced that he was, quote, going to be giving a directive to the Secretary of War, Hegseth, and to the heads of the other pertinent national executive branch agencies to begin the process of identifying all of the documents relating to the UFO phenomenon and any extraterrestrial intelligence that might be involved with them. And he was going to be initiating the process of disclosing these documents publicly. But this announcement on February 19th was met with almost uniform skepticism, not only on the part of the UFO disclosure community, but on the part of all of the people who are aware of the history of Donald Trump, very specifically in light of his identical promise that he made during his campaign, if he were elected, to immediately publicly release all of the Epstein files. And yet, immediately upon his election, he was giving instructions to Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the Justice Department, to continue to conceal these documents. And even as of today, there's still some 2.5 million documents relating directly to the Epstein files that have not been revealed. And this brings us again back to the Epstein files. The third major news story was that in light of Donald Trump's past conduct with regard to the Epstein files, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who is the chair of the U.S. House Oversight Committee's task force on the declassification of U.S. government secrets, which has jurisdiction over both the Epstein files and the UFO disclosure files, she has now announced publicly that she intends to prepare and to introduce a bill into the House of Representatives similar to the bill that was passed relating to the Epstein files, which was called the Epstein Transparency Act. She's now talking about preparing and introducing, as the chair of the House Oversight Committee task force, an Epstein-like file, a UFO Transparency Act. The Epstein Act is the one that generated the discharge petition that actually overrode the refusal of the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, at the behest of Trump, to refuse to allow the Epstein Transparency Bill to be put on the floor for a vote. So a discharge petition was actually signed by a majority of the members of the House to force this, which got that statute passed. But even in light of that, Donald Trump is still giving direct orders to Pam Bondi of the Justice Department not to reveal the additional 2.5 million files. So the Epstein files once again raises its head, But the other members of the executive branch are responding to the directive of Trump, saying now the NASA is preparing a statement to issue in the event that Trump does, in fact, give such an order. But you'll notice they haven't issued their statement yet because he hasn't given the order yet. And Congressman Eric Burleson, who now has the brief on the UFO issue inside the task force on the declassification of government secrets, the special task force of the House Oversight Committee, of which Congresswoman Luna chairs. Because Congresswoman Luna is fully occupied trying to get access to the remaining Epstein files, Congressman Eric Burleson has been given responsibility, the primary responsibility, for pursuing the disclosure of the UFO-related files. And he has issued a public demand that he be given consent by the White House to go to the Patuxent Naval Air Station on the Patuxent River in Maryland, where Lou Elizondo, who, as you all know, was the director of the ATIP program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, inside the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Special Access Program, which was overseeing the taking down of UFOs and the reverse engineering of them to try to develop their technology into a new generation of weapon systems for our United States government. Lou Elizondo provided in writing to the United States Congress back on November 13th of 2025 his written revelation to the Oversight Committee that there was a facility on the Patuxent River at the Naval Air Station where a major non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft was to be stored. And that was the site from which the aircraft was to be transferred, ostensibly, from Lockheed Martin, that had possession of it, over to the Bigelow Aerospace Corporation, which was ordered stopped by the Director of Science and Technology of the Central Intelligence Agency. In fact, Congressman Burleson did get the authorization from the White House to go to the Patuxent Naval Air Station, but and he was able to report publicly, which he has done, that in fact the site looked exactly like the one that Lou Elizondo had reported to the House Oversight Committee, that there was in fact this extremely large, specially constructed hangar that was there, that was capable of storing a UFO. It was in a location that would enable the UFO to have been brought on the Patuxent River by barge, and there was a huge crane there, right there, that was capable of lifting a major UFO craft and putting it into the hangar, but the craft was no longer there. There's now been, since the February 19th announcement of Donald Trump, that he's going to be in the future sometime giving this directive to begin the process of government disclosure, there's been a big upsurge in the proposal for UFO-related major motion pictures in Hollywood, including a major motion picture that's going to be produced and directed by Bryce Zabel based upon the Roswell report that was prepared by Donald Schmitt of the Roswell crash of July of 1947. This is, of course, as you know, the most preeminent kind of crash site report for UFOs, even though there have been a significant number of others. This is the most prominent of all of them, and it turns out that Donald Schmitt and his co-author actually interviewed some 600 people over time, many of whom who had direct first-person accounts of what had transpired around this crash, confirming that it was in fact a UFO, and in fact that some 4 bodies of non-human occupants were recovered from the site and brought through the medical center down in Houston, Texas, to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, along with the disc itself. We at the New Paradigm Institute were convinced that there had been an actual UFO that crashed at Roswell because I had been privileged to participate directly in the process by means of which we got the photograph that was taken of General Ramey at his demand on the night of July 8th of 1947, in which he spread out before him in an airplane hangar the false evidence that it had been just a weather balloon that had crashed. Whereas we were able to, now because of the new modern technology, we were able to blow up the photograph and digitize the actual telegram that he had in his hand, in which it said take the disc to right field and bring the bodies of the victims. Okay, this is not a weather balloon telegram. Okay, so now that they're getting set to do another major movie, a full-length major motion picture, detailing all of the dramatic evidence that has been compiled on the veracity of the assertion that this was a UFO that crashed at the time. So this brings us to what I think is one of the most important reported stories relating to the UFO phenomenon of this past week since we last met with you, and this is the Saturday, March 7th interview of Eric Weinstein by Piers Morgan. This is an extraordinarily important interview that Eric Weinstein gave, and I want to talk about this today. There are a few different portions of this interview that I want to highlight. Eric Weinstein, as you may know, is a major summa cum laude PhD mathematics graduate from Harvard University who has been a major participant in public discussions about the UFO phenomenon and the ET phenomenon. I had the privilege of being interviewed by Eric Weinstein a number of years ago and had a big 5.5-hour interview with him. In that interview, I reviewed a lot of the many major cases that I've been involved in, from the Pentagon Papers case to Iran-Contra, the Karen Salud case, and numbers of others. But during that entire 5.5-hour interview, I never raised the issue with him about the UFO studies that I've been engaged in, of being legal counsel to the investigation by President Carter, being legal counsel for Dr. John Mack, being the general counsel to the Dr. Greer's Disclosure Project for 20 years, or even being the legal counsel for Lou Elizondo. That didn't come up because the questions he was asking me were about a lot of these other cases. And there was an evening that occurred when some friends of mine called me and said, "Oh, did you know that Eric Weinstein is on a podcast now, The Clubhouse, and he's being asked questions about the UFO phenomenon?" And he is indicating that he hasn't really looked into this issue in great depth, and he's a bit skeptical about all of the reports. In light of the fact that my friends knew that I'd been interviewed by Eric Weinstein, that maybe I should charge into this discussion. So they told me how to get on the Clubhouse, and I got on the Clubhouse, and Eric immediately recognized when I came in. He said, "Oh, look, here's Danny Sheehan, who has been involved in investigating lots of conspiracies in the past. Let's see what he thinks about this." And so at that point, I then informed Eric Weinstein that, in fact, I had this fairly deep background on the whole issue of UFOs. He was taken aback entirely by this. And because of the credibility that I had already established with Eric, Eric began to look deeply into this issue of the UFO phenomenon. And as he looked deeper and deeper into the phenomenon, it became more and more obvious to him that despite this massive program of disinformation that had been mounted by the United States Defense Department and the Central Intelligence Agency to try to designate anybody who believed in the UFO phenomenon to be literally mentally ill, that he took great umbrage at this, Eric Weinstein, and continued to dig deeper and deeper into this. When he was being interviewed by Piers Morgan, he was being interviewed initially about the war, of course, because that was the leading story this week about the war against Iran. In that conversation, Eric Weinstein designated Donald Trump as an existential threat to our entire human species and even to the continued functioning of our planet. And he said that there was a set of secrets relating to Trump that had not yet been revealed, and that this was going to lead him to a discussion of the Epstein files. And Donald Trump, his name is mentioned 1,000 times in just the documents that have already been disclosed. And there's clear circumstantial evidence that the reason why Donald Trump is so adamant about getting the Justice Department to protect and refuse to reveal the remaining 2.5 million documents is because they are probably replete with the name of Donald Trump. And so the question is, what is Eric Weinstein saying about the Epstein files that potentially relates to Donald Trump, that might potentially threaten his continued term in office, so as to be able to allay these activities that he's engaging in throughout the world. And he began to discuss this. And what he did is he immediately referred to a 1992 interview that had been conducted by Steve Bannon of Epstein. And he asked Epstein, why in the world, right at the end of the Cold War, did Jeffrey Epstein purchase the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico and then set up the Santa Fe Institute there? Why, as a major investor in Bear Stearns and a major financial person, why had he all of a sudden decided to finance this Santa Fe Institute? And Epstein said to him that I did that because I wanted to be close to the Sandia Laboratory down in New Mexico, where the top scientists that were investigating anti-gravity had been employed, but were being laid off now that the Cold War had come to an end. And I wanted to be there where I could operate a listening post to find out those that were being laid off and try to recruit them. So Eric Weinstein posed the question he said, nobody seems to be picking up on what kind of a spy Jeffrey Epstein really was. They're so fixated on this titillating sexual information about him recruiting these young teenage girls and compromising a number of very well-known and very wealthy and powerful and influential men by engaging them with these young girls. But later, Eric Weinstein was reporting that he, Epstein, was recruiting these scientists that were being laid off by the United States Defense Department at the end of the Cold War and bringing them into his own institute and interrogating them about the issue of anti-gravity and where the technology was coming from that they were examining and back engineering. And therefore, he points out Epstein was actively engaged in inquiring into this entire UFO issue. This is because Weinstein is predicting that the entire phenomenon of space-time is on the very brink of being transcended, he said, by these scientists, that they are at the very brink now of being able to understand the mechanics of the anti-gravity and the propulsion systems that are going to be able to transcend space-time, and that this is going to change everything on our planet. He asserted, in fact, he was convinced, the leading AI, Grok, he actually said, he is convinced as a major mathematician and physicist that Grok already fully understands many of the deepest secrets of our universe. This next period of the next couple of years are going to go down in all of history as one of the most important moments in all of history. He said, the term that he used, the people can now see that the tide is rushing out on today's modern physics, and that there's going to be a tsunami coming in the immediate future where we are going to transcend the entire capitalist system, and we're going to transcend the conflict between communism and capitalism, because the UFO and alien secret is being hidden, and that this is going to come out, and that it turns out that Jeffrey Epstein was spying on this program and trying to gather this information about this whole thing. And he actually went so far as to say that we are going to discover, as we dig into the Epstein files, that there is a major connection between the development by the United States of the atomic bomb in New Mexico and the UFOs in Mexico and the activities of Jeffrey Epstein in New Mexico at this Santa Fe Institute. I'm suggesting that we have to now begin in the UFO movement to realize that those who are concerned about the activities that are being undertaken now to launch this kind of war of choice against Iran, the military activities against Venezuela, the threatened military activities against Cuba, the fact that there is this potential biblical scale war now expanding in the Middle East, threatening the potential involvement of Russia in a potential thermonuclear confrontation between the United States and Russia. We have to keep in mind that one of the major concerns that the U.S. military people who are involved in attempting to push for the disclosure of this UFO information, who've been involved in helping to draft the Senate bill that was passed back in 2003. These insurgents inside the legacy program of the UFO program who are pushing are asserting that something imminent is getting ready to happen, and that it's going to be absolutely essential in their mind that we get this information out to the American people and to the world so that we won't regret it. Listen to Eric Weinstein. Go to the March 7th interview with Piers Morgan by Eric Weinstein and follow what is being talked about here now with regard to the Jeffrey Epstein files, because deep beneath all of the sexual titillation of the Epstein files resides not only this major financial scandal that he was involved in, of probing into and joining forces with intelligence agencies like Mossad, the Central Intelligence Agency, and others in their vast secret moving of monies all around the world, including major gold shipments and other valuable minerals, etc. But there's going to be this still deeper story of the involvement of Epstein in spying upon the UFO reverse engineering program. And we'll be bringing you updates on this as the weeks proceed. This is Dan Sheehan. I am the director of the New Paradigm Institute. Please go to the site of the New Paradigm Institute, and if you have not done so yet, sign up to become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure, because this is the on-the-ground operation that we are engaged in to compel disclosure of the UFO information in these files. Thank you for joining us today.
To join the citizen movement for disclosure, visit newparadigminstitute.org/take action.